Hey, Life Designers. Welcome to this week's episode of the blog. In this episode, we are going to talk about the idea of balance. And in the blog down below, I talk about how I do not like the word balance, particularly in the context of work-life balance. I think that is a phrase that is not only overused, but I think it really is unhelpful in several ways. First of all, I don't like the idea of drawing a boundary around work and life and thinking of those two things as separate and distinct. I realize that a lot of people do make that distinction in their lives, and I think it is a bit unhelpful when it comes down to actually managing your relationship between those two entities. I don't like that, but we're going to avoid getting into that in too much detail this week. I also think that the idea of balance is unhelpful because it sets up an equation. It sets up a dynamic where if something gets more over here, it has to go down over here, and it creates a really kind of, in my opinion, unhealthy equation that results in some negative dynamics. And I talk a lot about that in the blog down below. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out the write-up. For the video portion, as I try to each week, I want to try to look at the idea of harmony, which is the word that I suggest instead of balance. I want to look at that in the context of life design. So if that is of interest to you, then stick around because we're going to get into it right now. So now when it comes to life design, we like to have people take a step back and look at their lives in an objective way. And that is the first step of the life design process, is really kind of looking at how well things are going in a way that you don't normally look at your life. I often use the analogy of a fish swimming in a bowl. The fish doesn't realize they're in a bowl. They don't realize that they're in water. To the fish, that's just life. And we live our lives much the same way, in that our entire lives are just happening. And they're complex, and there's a lot of things going on, and we don't really ever stop to notice the connections between these different pieces of our lives, and we don't really ever take a step back to notice the water that we are swimming in, metaphorically. So what we do at the Life Design Center is we ask people to look at your life through a tool that we break life up into 7 areas. And this is not a new concept. The wheel of life has been around for decades. We happen to use our own version of it, and we break life up into 7 categories. The 7 categories are health, work, finances, relationships, growth and development, fun and recreation, and spirituality. So these are the 7 areas that we ask people to assess. And by taking a step back and looking at your life through each of those 7 lenses, you get a real different perspective on your life. And that allows you to, 1, assess how well things are going. It gives you a better sense of where you might want to go in your life. But really, what I want to talk about today is it allows you to better understand the way the different areas of your life are actually interacting, and how one area can have a huge influence over another area of your life. And sometimes those connections are obvious, but other times they're not. And I want to share with you an example of a recent encounter that I had at the Life Design Center where that connection was not obvious. And I think you'll find this interesting and perhaps even applicable to your own life. So now this story is of a woman who came to the Life Design Center, and as we talked about what she was trying to do in her life, her situation was she was recently retired. Within the last year, she retired from a long career and was really trying to figure out, okay, what do I do with the rest of my life? And that is a very common topic for people at the Life Design Center. What I discovered in talking to her was really interesting. She had spent her entire life being a very task-oriented individual, and she was generally speaking, her personality was very serious and very directed, very outcome-driven. And that was interesting because when I asked her what she had been up to in terms of trying to figure out what to do with the rest of her life, what had she been doing so far, she hadn't been doing much. She had been very static and very much just kind of sitting back waiting for something to happen. And this is super common when it comes to life design. This is what we mean by living by default. Basically, you just sit there and you wait for life to present something else to you, which is interesting for such a task-driven person that she was in that situation. You would normally think that a task-driven person would just lay out a plan and go do it. And as we talked more and more, and we actually had her fill out her life design assessment, we noticed that her score was really low in the area of fun and recreation. And as we talked a little bit about why that score was so low, what it turned out that she, over the course of her life, fun had never really been an important part of her life. And so as a result, she had a very, what I would call, underdeveloped fun muscle, which you don't normally think of that as being a muscle, but I think it's useful to think about it in that way. For most of her life, the idea of fun and having fun and making that an important part of her life just was never there. So, of course, that doesn't mean she never had fun in her life, but fun had never been a priority in her life, and she really had lost, or maybe maybe it had been since childhood that she hadn't really had a really playful sense of fun and living in the moment. Okay, fine. Now, how does that apply to her problem or her goal? Well, if you think about what a person in her situation might need to do to figure out what's next in her life, she probably needs to be putting herself out there and engaging in different activities and meeting different people to just try to get exposed to some new ideas, to try to figure out, okay, what is going to be important for the next 5 or 10 years of my life? Where do I want to spend my time? Well, if you are the type of person who can't appreciate the moment and can't have fun in an instantaneous situation, then the idea of putting yourself out there and going and doing new things, like going to meetup groups or going to a book club that you've never been part of, or going to try some new activity, these things are going to be rather intimidating to you at one extreme, or pointless at the other, because you're going to say to yourself, well, if I go and I spend all that time, what if it doesn't work out, or what if I don't like these people, or what if the thing that they're up to turns out to be not that interesting to me? I've just wasted all of that time. And that's a valid way to think. However, if you come at that from the perspective of a really strong sense of fun and enjoyment, maybe those 3 hours were just fun just for the sake of spending 3 hours with interesting and new people. And the idea of having fun could open up these opportunities in a way that a very kind of task outcome driven way of thinking would shut down. So it was just really interesting to see how fun was a real barrier, or the lack of fun was a real barrier in what she was trying to accomplish in the world. And it was not intuitive. This connection between her fun score and the rest of her life was definitely not obvious until we got in there and started really kind of looking at the connection between the different areas of your life. So with that, what does that mean to you? This is what it means to you. There's a real value in taking a step back and looking at your life through each of the 7 areas and asking yourself, how well am I doing in each of those 7 areas? And not only that, how are these 7 areas connected with one another? How are they influencing one another? And are the 7 areas actually in harmony? And that is a really, really useful exercise when it comes to advancing your life design. So with that, I'm going to recommend an opportunity that is a recent development here at the Life Design Center. We have just launched the Life Design Jumpstart Kit. And part of that free Jumpstart Kit is a tool called the Life Design assessment and planning tool. And it's basically a tool that will allow you to go through each of those 7 areas, and we ask you 10 questions for each, and it will give you a sense of how well you're doing in each of those areas. But ultimately, the goal is for you to assess, how am I doing in each of those areas? And then we have some tools to help you identify the interconnection and how these different areas may be either in harmony or not. So I definitely recommend, if you've got some interest in this area, go ahead and check out the Life Design Jumpstart Kit. It's totally free. You can download it from within the blog here or off of our website. And there's the tool itself, and there's some training videos and some worksheets that'll help you along the way. And it's a really great way to kind of just take a step back and look at your life and say, okay, what am I up to here? What is actually going on in my life? And if there's any kind of stress or feelings of stuckness, or even just a longing for something else in the world, this is a great way to kind of put your finger on it and say, okay, that is what is going on. Now I have a much better understanding, and now I can, potentially do something about it. So check that out if you have the time and the inclination. So with that, I appreciate you taking the time this week to hang out with me on the blog. As always, I really appreciate you and your attention. And if you have any topics that you'd like to suggest, definitely put those in the comments or shoot me a note. I would love to hear from you and get your ideas into the queue for topics for the future. With that, I appreciate your time again, and I wish you all the best. And until next time, prosperous journey. Take care.